This is a nightmare.
Hello everyone, I'm Keckers, and today we're here to dig through every twist and turn to bring us to the true evil mastermind behind everything. The one true villain responsible for all the suffering that our boy Loki has endured since the beginning of this series, and perhaps since his first appearance in the MCU. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to see the man behind the curtain responsible for it all. Spoilers ahead for basically everything Marvel and every Marvel show up to episode 5 of Loki. But before we get there, let's discuss Disney Plus and their Marvel series. You see, there's been something rather important about each and every one of these stories and what they seem to be about, and it holds clues for where we're going. We start with WandaVision. In that show, we take Wanda, fresh out of Avengers Endgame, and she's at her lowest. She's lost a man she loves and retreats into fantasy, into a world of television to cope with it. She's a person on pause, not processing her grief, and because of that, we see how that grief affects and taints everything and everyone around her. Over the course of that show, we see her slowly realizing who she is and what she's doing, the harm she's causing others, and the harm she's causing herself because of not focusing it properly, culminating with her fully claiming her power, her grief, and using it to become the most powerful version of herself. She gets everything she needed, but none of what she wanted. And unfortunately, at the end, we see that she hasn't actually realized it as much as we hoped she has. But, well, that's likely to be picked up in Doctor Strange. Now, Falcon and the Winter Soldier also picks up a bit after Endgame. Sensing a pattern here? And it focuses on Sam and Bucky, the two characters closest to Steve, and dealing with the legacy of that character and how it affects their own lives moving forward. Sam saddled with carrying the legacy of one of the most honored and respected men alive, the symbol of not only a country, but of heroism itself. And Bucky, well, he's Steve's best friend, who's fallen so far figuratively and literally, only to be brought back into the world by a friend who, as far as we know, has separated his own self from it. Bucky's someone who finds himself trapped between who he was and who he's trying to be. He's lived so long as a Winter Soldier, struggling with that legacy and with those memories that he doesn't know how to move forward, accept his new place. He's caused so much suffering that he's not worthy in his own mind of making something new. He's just Steve's friend and the Winter Soldier. But to have him develop more, having him help Sam, having him help shoulder his burden, as well as allowing himself to forgive himself for his actions that he wasn't actually responsible for, and helping others find closure and growth, we see that he's stepping out and actually taking control of his own destiny. Now as for Sam, well, Sam's dealing with the problems of legacy, specifically the legacy of being a black man carrying the weight and responsibility of a country, of being not only himself, but being his whole race. Now, this is something that a lot of people might not want to hear, but representation, responsibility, these things matter. These things affect people. I'm a nerd. I'm a comics fan. I'm someone at the tabletop and LARP communities. I cosplay. I deal with video games. But I'm also black, and because of that, on more than one occasion, I've found myself representing the black voice in those areas. Even though I'm just one individual, I'm still the black guy. I still feel the weight of every time being someone who's the black guy at the gaming group, the black guy at the LARP, the black guy, period. Sometimes the only black guy at the comic book store. Now, this is something which happens a lot less now, but growing up, I had to deal with this on a near constant basis. This is something that everyone's going to understand. This is something that everybody's going to have experienced, obviously. But these are things which happen to people and things which still kind of happen. I grew up in an area where there were comics, and I would go into a comic book store and I would literally be the only person who looked like me there. And yeah, that was strange, but I had to be on my best behavior because if I walked in there and wasn't the best, then I knew even if someone didn't want to, they'd see other people like me and be wary. It's strange, it's bad, but it happens. And Sam being Captain America, Sam picking up a legacy, is him making a conscious choice to represent us and represent America and represent everything. And he didn't at first want to deal with that, but over the course of the story, he realized that only he could. And yeah, he grew, he developed, and he found who he was over the course of that story. Falcon Winter Soldier's great.
I'm a black man carrying the stars and stripes. What don't I understand?
And it's great because over the course of the story, we see him learning to balance these things. Balancing being a hero and being black, finding out who he is, what he's going to represent, how he's going to represent it, learning about history in the form of Isaiah Bradley, remembering the past, realizing the opportunities that he has and the opportunities he can give others moving forward. And it's about growth. And that brings us to where we are with Loki. After Endgame, they've taken our boy at one of his lowest points, after just suffering his great defeat at the hands of the Avengers, stewing with self-righteous anger and resentment, fury at being denied his
glorious purpose.
And then taken to a place where his whole life, where everything that he struggled and suffered to do is revealed to be utterly meaningless, where he's just one of many versions of himself that have failed time and time again. He's confronted with Sylvie, a variation of himself, a variation on his life, and forms a connection with her. Because that's really what this is about. The connection of friendship, of love. As much as the meaning of shipping and narcissism is talked about, Loki is someone who hates himself, has hated himself ever since the first Thor movie. And by learning to care about Sylvie, learning to love her, he's loving himself. He's also exposed to the TVA, an organization that's all about keeping time on track, keeping destiny on track, and his destiny is to lose. Not simply to lose, but to be alone. And the time when he loves himself, when he's not alone, it creates the biggest branch imaginable. Then we're led to discover that the beings behind the TVA aren't what they seem. Nothing is. And those pruned end up in a void somewhere. A void where Loki is confronted with more of himself than he can stomach. Every possible permeation and possibility of who and what he can be, and how they fall far short of what they should be. But Loki doesn't need a void. He's always been trapped. They've always been trapped. Every time a Loki tries to be better or to be more, the TVA step in and stop them. And who could be responsible for stopping Loki from being his better self, from becoming more than a bit play in other people's stories? Who keeps Loki from growing? Well, it's Loki. It really could only be him. This story has never been about Kang or Immortus or any other big-time villain trying to take over the world. Sure, that type of stuff could happen. But like I said in the video a while back, the Disney Plus stories are personal journeys for the characters. They're about personal growth, personal development. And a story about someone else being prevented from developing can only really have that person as the villain. This is a Loki story. This is a Loki that somehow, some way is trying to stop other Lokis, other versions of himself from improving and growing beyond what they are, so that they're not a threat to him. A good Loki, a Loki that has friends and family and loved ones, is a Loki that doesn't become this guy. And he's afraid to be more than that. He's afraid to be more than a villain. And that's why Sylvie's so dangerous. She's not trying to rule or conquer, she's trying to break the wheel. And our Loki is someone who's trying to break himself. I'm telling you that at the end of the day, this is the story of Lokis. This is why the only serious use of variants have been variant Lokis. The only real interactions, the only real discussions, because it's right there in the title. Loki. This is about Lokis, good, bad, every permeation. Kang is just a new Mephisto. Every one of these Disney Plus stories has had the villain introduced and developed over the course of the series. And I see little reason for Loki to be the one to randomly break that chain. To randomly just have a villain pop up at the end of the story and say, "Hi guys, I'm right here." No. This is a villain who hasn't even been named by the characters. Kang's not coming, guys. There's no emotional stakes or connection for Kang or any other big bad. But it being Loki makes perfect sense when you step back and see it as the journey of one man learning to love and accept himself. And hey, there's also the monetary reasoning. If Kang's going to be the big bad moving forward, they're not going to introduce him in a TV show, no matter how much they expect that TV show to be popular. This is a personal story and it needs a personal enemy. Well, we'll find out next week how right or how wrong I was. And hey, if this is the future, write in the comments to see whether or not I was a sage or a dump. Anyway, this is Keckers, and I enjoyed talking about this stuff with you guys, and I'll see you next time. Remember, hit that like button and subscribe, or hit that dislike button if you hated my stuff. See you next time.
Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the video though. Press subscribe so you're notified when I upload again.